Do you remember when you came into the world, you were born? You don't have any memories from that, right? Most likely. But let me tell you this. In the time before you were born, you were part of your mother's body. You were starting to develop a humanesque kind of a body. So you seemed a little bit human-like, but you were living in a sort of a oceanic environment where everything was warm, comfortable, you were provided with everything. You didn't have to think or to feel anything. In that time after, at a certain point, you become a little bit cramped in that space, and the body of your mom thought about the same. You are getting a little bit cramped in here, so she wanted to get rid of you, and she sprayed out her waters. And then you, being cramped like that and feeling dried up, you flushed with that water out of the body, and with lots of pain, you come eventually through a narrow gap like a stargate, and you end up in a larger part of the world than the sea that you were in. The disadvantage of this new part of the world is that it was cold and there were strange things happening, and the nourishment was disconnected from your body. And then you were forced to find new ways to survive in this new reality. Your mouth opened, your nose opened, you started breathing, and a big fire was spreading through your body. Your body started to get color because all of a sudden your blood got activated and absorbed oxygen from the air and the space around you. And it was pain. There was a lot of pain. It was not so much the birth which was painful, it was the breathing that was painful. And that fire we have been struggling with all our life. We found that we are dependent on that fire, and therefore we suppress this continuous feeling of pain in ourselves, which is at the foundation of our future death. At the moment when we are living in this pain, we are finding all kind of other dependencies. And these dependencies, they gave us a sense of victory every time when we found them. The breast of our mother, our first sandwich, our first cow or pig or chicken or whatever kind of animal we were being fed by our parents as a result of the cultural and the commercial availability of foods. Then gradually we started developing all kind of tastes to fulfill this gnawing need for something that gives us power over our life, but all the time it seems to be fleeting. Everything comes in and goes, and whatever we eat, it can either give us a kick or it makes us sick. And at the moment when it gives us a kick, we think this is good because, we feel stronger. So we keep pursuing all kind of things that give it this kind of kick. And we do not realize that the foundation of this kick is stress. This stress is being increased time after time after time throughout our life in the growth of our body, which is also going together with pain. We are a little bit like the Hulk, and our body is growing and it's taking all kind of new shapes, and there's hair growing at a certain point, our sexual organs start functioning, we get all kind of desires on the inside, and we think we are maturing because this is what the culture around us says. It just means that we are adapting more and more towards an environment which is essentially hostile to us. I'm not trying to be negative here. I mean, in case you think like that, I'm actually talking about a very positive story, and this positive story has to unfold gradually in this thing that I am now talking about with you. So at the moment when we are getting to that point, because of the stress, we find out that if we are stressed enough, we start producing dopamine, and this dopamine gives us a sense of relief. And this sense of relief that we are going through in the moment that we believe that we experience that, we believe that we are on the right track. And as a result of that, addictions are born. Addiction to food, addiction to breath, addiction to drinking, addiction to alcohol, to drugs, to medication, to work, to sex, to sports, to meeting other people, to do all kind of habits which are in essence all very destructive and painful. They enhance the pain because they continuously make us go back. Just try to not eat for a few days. If you're fasting, yes, sure, after some time you start noticing like, oh, because I'm not eating, my body feels more calm and I start feeling really very nice. And it is nice to be knowing that you can do without food for a long time. But I have tried, by not eating for a long time, eventually our body starts hurting and it starts getting damaged and we start aging, and then we gradually start withering and dying. And with everything that we do, no matter what addiction we look for, eventually this addiction is going to let us wither and die. So there doesn't seem to be any progress. Then we go look for spiritual things and we go try to find enlightenment, and we want to transcend to all kind of things, which also create stress, which also create a dopamine rush. And therefore we walk behind religions and spiritual movements and feelings and practices which help us enhance this effect. And the cause of all this is our breathing. So let's talk about breathing today. Let's try to see if we can change our breathing into another kind of pattern through which we eventually can mitigate these kind of things. So let's go talk also, as a result of that, about food and about movement and about all kind of other things. And we're going to talk about it from both the common perspective, what you are probably used to, and the perspective of Daoism, in the way how I see it reflected in the Daoist classics and even in modern alchemical texts and perspectives that people are pursuing. So follow me. When we are looking at our daily activities, we see that we are continuously moving between the two extremes of doing something too much and doing something too little. When we are in need of feeling more energetic, we need to be able to do something, we go eat, but then we are being seduced by the tastes, and as a result of that we easily eat too much. And as a result of that we feel stuffed, we feel tired, and we feel lazy, and we feel like falling asleep after eating. At the moment when we don't eat enough, we start getting really emaciated, and as a result of the emaciation our body becomes weak and we don't have any power, we can't do very much, and as a result of this not being able to do very much, eventually we give in and we just lie there and die. When we get poisoned, similar like that, I happened to have that one time when I was in a cave retreat. I ate, during the drinking of water from a well, some insect, I still have no idea what it was, and it lodged in my throat and it started sucking things, and it created a lot of bile kind of substance in my neck. But as a result of that I couldn't eat, drink, and I could breathe. I felt very good in itself, but after a few days I realized like, oh, something is going wrong with my life, and if I stay here I am not going to survive my retreat. And it was very slow then that I realized there was something wrong with me, because inherently, like everybody else, I am not the smartest light in the room. But at the moment when I went out of my cave, there was a long stairs going down the cliff of the mountain, and at the moment when I walked down the cliff I felt the pressure in my body rising, and it was very hard to hold on to the stairs, and I knew I had to climb something like 5 meters before I would get at the floor. And the floor was about this wide, and then it would go down again. So it was a pretty steep cliff, and I had a small narrow part, and I felt very weak, because then after that I would still have to walk quite a distance before I could get to somebody who could maybe help me. But at the moment when I was climbing up the stairs, because the pressure, the insect got pressed out of my body, and then I could eat and drink again, and I could feel comfortable. Within half hour my body was feeling fine, so I went back into the cave and I went to finish my retreat, which was great. I mean, I had the best of times. But at the moment when you look at these things, that in spite of the fact that, we usually have little risk of poisoning, but we do have quite a lot of risk of eating too much. We also have a risk from not eating at the moment when anything is in the way, or we are fasting for too long a time without proper guidance who tells us like, now you really have to go eat. Yeah? So at the moment when these kind of things happen, normally we do pretty okay. There are some things, like for instance in the Daoist classics about fasting and about breathing practice and so on, it is being said that eating spices, herbs, fat food, oily food, food with a lot of variation, too much food, all these kind of things, they confuse our mind, and as a result of the confusion in our mind, we get, as a person, we get confused, our mind gets confused, and we start accepting reasons for things that are actually really very unreasonable. And that is the nature of our society. It is based on things that sound very reasonable because everybody's doing it, so everybody must be right. Yes, but then you can see that the elitist worldview, like the Daoist is an elitist worldview, can sometimes be more right when you think about it. At the moment when we are going to the gym, likewise, you are exercising, you're pushing yourself, or maybe you're even very average in your achievements and you're not working too hard to go there. But at the moment when you are working, you start noticing at a certain point, like, oh, there is this particular kind of high and this flow that is happening in my exercises, and I feel really very good. And then you have a trainer or a coach that says, like, go further, go more, go do more. And as a result that you end up in the Olympic Games and a destroyed body after so many years of exercise. When you go to the army, you think like, oh, that's nice, being nice together with all kind of people, social environment, but then you have to learn to shoot, and then you have to learn to shoot at real people, and your mind, your heart, your body, everything says no, because it's not in the nature of people to kill other people. And as a result of the training that you get, you gradually overcome that, and you become a little bit of a sociopath. And then at the moment when somebody says, shoot at this, you go shoot at that. Because you're overfed with stimulants, which make you confused and make you not clear in your thinking. In the same way, like in society, we see there are continuously media impressions from the right and the left about the way how society has to be run. You have no time to think or to read or whatever about how society should be run. And at the moment, like in this period, when the right-wing parties, they have the highest capital to promote things, and they have the most crazies in their midst to yell in your ear all the time that foreigners are to blame. And this tiny minority of the country is the same like in the Second World War, this tiny minority of Jews that had enough money to maybe destabilize the country. This right-wing people who are representing the black money in the world, the drug dealers, the gun runners, the large industrials, the chemical factories that make medications, the food factories, and so forth and so forth. All these kind of organizations that are trying to meddle with our thoughts and feelings, trying to make us make decisions in their favor so that they can survive longer. These are the demons of our life. And then we get to blame the foreigners that are basically our family. Normally, when you meet a stranger, you see them in need, you will open your heart and you will give them something, food. Even with beggars on the street, because they're junkies or whatever kind of reasons, we have learned not to give them anything. We're not to help them, to send them or to tell them to go to an organization that will help them. Because at the moment when we help them, we feel taken advantage of, because everybody told us that there is an advantage in there for these people to take something from you. Don't worry, everybody's like that. We are all overstimulated by all kinds of things because our society is way too fast and way too pressured. So as a result of that, we cannot really think about things anymore. With breathing, it is exactly the same. So let me tell you a little bit about that. With breathing, it is exactly the same. We are being told to breathe, and we have learned over time that if we are breathing and we breathe intense enough, then at a certain point we start noticing that if the stress becomes high enough, we don't experience it as such. We think we feel more high, because in the more stress we get, the more dopamine we make. And at a certain point, that dopamine becomes so much that we cannot make a difference anymore between what is transcendent or what is actually physical. So we think that mind and the body are two different kind of things. While in reality, both Buddhism, Daoism, and even as far as I understand in Hinduism, there is no real separation between body and mind. Yeah, sure, you can go up all the way to Brahma, Atman, or you can go into all kind of transcendent realms. But all these kind of things, they still need to have a body to be experienced, because at the moment when you die, there is nothing to check you as being a human being. So these are like drugs. They bring you to all kinds of experiences that give you a feeling like of achievement in a reality that is hopeful for you, because it makes you think and remember that womb kind of feeling inside the belly of your mom. So at the moment when you are letting go of your body and you can experience things as a drug within your daily spiritual practices, can you relate to that? I think you do when you think about it. Like, yeah, these kind of things, they make me feel comfortable. It's a little bit like eating a cookie or a chocolate or a nice meal with a good piece of meat, or vegetarian with all kind of things that are tickling my tastes. That's the secret. It is all tickling your tastes, and as a result of that, you get stuck into the experience. Let me adapt the camera a bit. So when you get stuck to these kind of experiences, then it doesn't mean that the experiences are bad per se, but they are not going to help you, because the things that we do in life, they are there to help us live better, longer lives. You probably are worried, depending on what age, the level of worry can be different, but at the moment when you are watching this video, you are most likely also worried about the idea of your future, what it's going to be like. The world around us is very worrying at the moment, so that is definitely giving particular kind of stress. And the amount of people that I hear that say like, well, I hope the world is going to manage or something like this. And being now 60, I have been going through this thing already when I was in my puberty in the 80s and in 1990s, when there was this continuous threat of a nuclear war between America and the Soviet Union. In the lives of people, there's all kind of disasters taking place because of their health and stuff like this, and our breathing is somewhere there at the bottom of all these things. So what is it with that breathing that is so problematic? When I first came across breathing as a separate practice, which I didn't know because I learned breathing as part of my Taoist practice. At the moment when I first learned that, that was from Western breathing people. There's a large movement, there's websites and Facebook pages for this, and some of the people who are important or meaningful in their work make a lot of money with breathing practices. They all more or less follow the same trajectory as I saw in that workshop, namely that people were breathing in a particular rhythmic pattern through which they eventually got into sort of a high which had to give them a sense of relief. In many psychotherapies, also people were being brought into a hypnosis or in a form of trance where rhythmic breathing brought them a particular kind of relief, whether it's being pressured in your body through massage or anything like that. In all these kind of circumstances, the breathing patterns of a person changes, and as a result of that, they find a relief. And it's a little bit like when you have a air tire around the wheel of a bicycle, and even in old cars. Nowadays, I think the cars are all made from wood, these wheels, so I'm not sure about how that works. But in the past, they were made from rubber with air inside. And at the moment when you want to bring air in, that goes through a small appendage on the wheel, on the tire on the inside, and you bring it in. But at the moment when it is too hard, you can open it a little bit and air can come out. And a lot of techniques that we use, they are either to pump in air or to let it go out. Pump in air, let it go out. But we don't really learn to manage the air pressure inside the wheel. Because the pressure in the wheel is continuously changing because of the using of the wheel, and our body also the same. The pressure in our body continuously changes. Sometimes we need high blood pressure, sometimes we need low blood pressure. And anybody who has had a heart attack or is using high blood pressure medications or low blood pressure medication, they will know that the medication prevents them to do something. There's a lot of things that help us to prevent doing something. So they take us out of a danger zone, but also prevent that we ever can go back in there. And that is not the point of having a human body. The point of a human body is to be able to adjust in all kind of things. When I was starting to teach Wudang, Daoist Wudang fitness, Kung Fu fitness, in fact, to people on the basis of what I heard from several Daoists, including my teacher in the Wudang mountains, then at that moment I realized like, oh, okay, the problem is over breathing. So when I had to redesign things, because my assignment from Sifu Yaswende was to restructure what I learned not only in our school, but in the Wudang Mountains per se, all the things that I learned there into something that is suitable for city people like you and me. I am a city person. I didn't grow up in the mountains. I love the mountains, but I returned back to be more like an ambassador of what I learned there than to be like a grand master or something like this, which runs its own school in the mountains and, you know, waits for the moment when he's old enough to retreat somewhere in a cave and then become an immortal. And at the moment when you are doing this kind of breathing, all this kind of rhythmic breathing, you go like this. And this is what is called throat breathing. Throat breathing is originating here and here in your mind. And at the moment when you do this kind of breathing, you bring in the air inside and you think it works according to a mechanism which uses the lungs to distribute oxygen into your body. But in fact, what Daoism says, no, it's not oxygen, because that is not relevant. We can't see it, so it doesn't really exist. But what happens is that at the moment when we take the space around us that is pretty much formless, we bring it inside and we can feel the nature of that space around us inside our body. We fill it up and we can feel the pressure and the fire inside there. It fills us up and we experience this emptiness moving through our body, but it is also in a way energizing. It is a method of breathing that enhances the presence of the nitrogen inside it, if you look at it from a scientific perspective, so that our body can feel more vigorized and invigorated. The reason why people use all kind of green stuff is exactly because of the nitrogen in these plants. So you can do that yourself because it is fully into the air. And at the moment then when you breathe that in, and you feel the fullness of this emptiness filling up your body, that means that at the places where the emptiness is, nothing else is left. But what you do feel is that at the moment when this air comes into your body, there is this inherent fire, heat inside. This is the heat that is part of the reality around us. In Shaolin, that is used to enhance the strength of your muscles. In modern bodybuilding and in modern yoga, it is done for exactly the same reason, to help you develop this Nazi kind of ideal body that makes you look as if you're a really powerful creature. I almost said monster. You hear that? At the moment when you are doing that, of course you feel great, because all the drugs that you're pumping in your body to resist the pain of the oxygenation, because the oxygenation creates acidification, and acidification stiffens up your body. This is also why when you stop doing exercise, stop doing breathing exercise, your body immediately starts getting more fat, because all this acidification becomes dampness in your body. All the yang of the body, the vitality of your body also, and at that moment the steam of your body, it all becomes dampness, and it puts itself down all over your body and creates overweight. As a child you're very motile, you're moving a lot, and at school you learn to not be like that. At school you learn to sit, and as a result of all the sitting, you don't move. The burn that you need to grow and to grow healthy is at that moment not taking place, and your body becomes more fat. And that starts manifesting more and more the older you get. So that's a lifelong life of breathing a lot, but not moving enough. So in the Wudang Kung Fu Fitness, I realized like, oh, okay, there has to be a specific kind of breathing pattern, and that is explained in the Neidan practices. First of all, in the Neidan practice, it says you should avoid that yang turns into fire, right? And at the moment when you breathe heavily, you create fire, so that is not good. In the Daoist breathing practices, what we do, is very simply go from stage to stage to stage, where you are allowing natural processes to occur and to grow into that process. So at the moment when you're sitting, you're meditating like on the Dantian. Then at the moment when you're focusing on the Dantian, then at that moment, over time, very gradually, you start noticing that this yang in the Dantian and the yin in the Dantian, as part of the four kidneys, is gradually accumulating, filling up, and it gets to become a De Qi experience. A De Qi experience is what is called the arrival of Qi. And the arrival of qi means that at that moment the dantian starts to become functional. This is the birth of the spiritual embryo, and that has to become cultivated because it is nothing yet. It's like an embryo in a human body. It isn't human yet. It is just a something. It is just a shape. It is not a form yet. And at the moment when it becomes a form, it has to be a human form. Even when a child is born, it doesn't have a form yet. That's why nature selects people through disease and all kind of other factors in the wild, and in our society we're humane enough to not let it happen. But at the moment when you look at nature, you see that nature pre-selects people on the capacity to survive in its environment, and as a result of that, some of the weaker kids, they will die. When children are born with deformities, mentally, emotionally, or whatever kind of things, they might not manage to grow into adults. And in some cases they do, because they are very strong and they are part of, an experiment in nature, you might say. So we are also like that. We were a deformity once, and eventually we became who we are. So you have to respect that. That's nature trying to find its way. At the moment when we are like we are humane people, we take care of the weak, and we take care of the vulnerable, and we help them to flourish as much as possible. We take time for them. And the thing is that for ourselves, we don't take that time. So what we want to do is we want to learn to develop that kind of time into ourselves, because every stage in the breeding pattern where the body has to develop in a particular kind of way needs ripening. It's a very slow process. In Taoism, the main virtue is waiting, doing something and waiting while doing it. And at the moment when you are waiting and you are doing it, and at that moment you gradually get into the next stage. At the moment when we really wait for the young to ripen, then at that moment it goes up, and it takes about 25 minutes to 30 minutes for one young to rise up. But you first have to spend like 100 days just to get your dantian activated, through which this young gradually can rise. And before it is all around, it takes about half hour to an hour, because the young rises, the yin rises, both they need their own ripening period, and then gradually over time it becomes faster. So the steam goes up and then the condense comes down, because here our head touches heaven, and heaven is ice cold, like snow, like rain, like hail, and the air itself. So as a result of that, it condenses, and when it comes down into our heart, and from our heart it comes back into the dantian, and then gradually it starts replenishing our body. When the yin comes down through the renmai, it actually comes down all the way to our bladder, and it fills us up like this, and once it reaches our throat, it starts replenishing the yin channels in our body. So at the moment when that happens, because of the fullness of the yin channels, the likelihood to get chronic diseases becomes less. At the moment when the yang channels get nourished, because of the yang spreading out from here in the process of the dantian ripening, and at that moment all the active processes of our body, they become less dominant and they can be controlled much better. And that is largely through breathing and digestion. So I hope this video is a little bit helpful. What I tell you is based on my translation work in the Guide Sifu. I can definitely advise you to sign up for that. It's about €5 a month. It's just really not much, but it helps me to make sure I can keep on doing this kind of work. And I think a lot of the material which is in there is really very relevant for anybody wanting to study anything about Chinese medicine and Daoist alchemy, as well as in Tai Chi Chuan and Qigong. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and see you next video.